peace, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. Chapter 5, Part 3. Artistry that enriches the world. In 1984, several talented graduates from the Little Angels Performing Arts School, now the Sunhua Arts Middle and High School, had returned from their study at schools such as the Princess Grace Academy in Monaco and the Royal Ballet School in the United Kingdom. Recognizing their great potential, we created a professional ballet company, the Universal Ballet, to provide an opportunity for these talented youth to display their skills, delight the public, and impact our nation. At that time, my husband conveyed the internal value of ballet in these words. When a ballerina stands on the tips of her toes with her head raised toward heaven, her posture represents reverence for God. It is an expression of ardent longing. Ballet dancers use the beautiful body given to them by God to express their love for Him. It is the highest form of art. Adrienne Delis was the company's artistic director. Moon Hoon Suk, my daughter-in-law, a Little Angels alumna who studied ballet at the Princess Grace Academy and was a principal dancer in the Washington Ballet Company in Washington, D.C., was a founding member. In the summer of 1984, the Universal Ballet gave its first performance, Cinderella, at the Little Angels Performing Arts Center in Seoul. At that time, the National Ballet Company was the Seoul Ballet Company in Korea. It performed only within the country, and this put Korea on the fringe of the ballet world. The Universal Ballet Company brought Korean ballet to the world stage. The troupe has toured 21 nations and presented some 100 different ballets in 1,800 performances, reflecting its motto, Heavenly Art Creating a World of Beauty. Among its many honors, the company has received the Republic of Korea Culture and Arts Award. Until the early 2000s, the Universal Ballet featured the Russian classical ballet style. After that, it expanded its repertoire to include European romantic ballets and modern ballets. It now performs ballets from Korea and other nations and creates its own innovative and original performances. It was the first Korean ballet company, and the second in Asia, to perform John Cranko's masterpiece of dramatic ballet, Enriches. Furthermore, it was the first Korean company to perform Sir Kenneth Macmillan's Romeo and Juliet, a masterpiece in the repertoire of the UK Royal Ballet Company. The company also created unique ballets based on Korean folk tales and traditions. One of its most famous works, Shim Chung, created in 1986, is a tale of filial love. It has been performed 200 times in 10 countries, touching the hearts of people all over the world. During its world tour in 2012, the company was invited to showcase the beauty of Korean ballet in the global centers of ballet, Moscow and Paris. Chunhyang, an original ballet based on an ancient story of pure love, and the ballet musical Shim Chung, recast for children, were both very well received. Years ago, when Korea had nothing to offer the global culture, the Universal Ballet Company stood like a lonely crane. By overcoming many difficulties and touring every continent, it has shown all people Korea's high artistic standard. It will continue to go forward, guided by the love of God. Mother of Peace. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. Chapter 5, Part 4. Media expressing universal values. The year 1975 was a time when a shadow of gloom hung over the world. The U.S. pulled out of Vietnam that April, leaving the country in the hands of the communists. People were shocked and horrified as the communists in Vietnam and its neighbor Cambodia slaughtered entire populations. Across the globe, communism was gaining in strength. I was born in North Korea, and I experienced firsthand the cruelty of communism and the wretchedness of war, so I knew very well that when Vietnam fell, it would lead to bloody massacres and the spread of its harsh ideology to neighboring countries. In Japan of the 1970s, the unification movement was growing, but communism was also gaining power. The Korean residents in Japan created separate pro-Seoul and pro-Pyongyang groups, and they often engaged in confrontation. My husband and I decided that the most effective way to influence Japan as a free society, and protect it from communism, would be to create a newspaper. In democratic countries, the media is more often critical than constructive. Trying to gain market share, editors pander to forces that persecute those who aren't politically correct or who practice a minority religion. My husband and I imagined a different kind of media, one that is constructive and represents fairness and absolute values. With this in mind, in January 1975 we founded the Seikai Nippo newspaper in Tokyo. Our Japanese members had great expectations for the paper but found that maintaining a newspaper is like climbing a hill carrying a heavy load on a dark night. Left-wing groups opposed us in every conceivable way. At the same time, however, Seikai Nippo gained support from law-abiding citizens and anti-communist organizations. It became a newspaper loved by the Japanese people. To this day, Seikai Nippo has fearlessly reported the objective truth. The power of truth protected Japan from communism. In early 1981, when my husband and I heard that the Washington Star, the conservative voice in Washington, D.C., was closing down, we were concerned. There were two well-established newspapers in that city, the Washington Star and the Washington Post. The Washington Star, which had been in operation for over 130 years, had run into financial difficulties. Soon there would be only one newspaper in the most politically powerful city of the United States, and that newspaper, the Washington Post, was left-leaning in its editorial stance. There was a need for a newspaper in Washington that would protect faith, freedom and family values, and no American conservatives were willing to step into the breach. When my husband and I decided to take this on, people trying to be prudent and wise told us again and again that it would be difficult to publish a new newspaper in the capital of the United States. We had never shied away from a task because it was difficult, and we didn't then. On May 17, 1982, after a great deal of effort to find a building and printing presses and hire competent, dedicated staff, the first issue of the Washington Times was published. Opponents said that the Washington Times would be a propaganda instrument for the Unification Church, but such words reflected prejudice. It is difficult these days to run a newspaper at a profit, and the Washington Times lost money from the outset. Yet its absence would leave no conservative newspaper in the U.S. Capitol. It would mean the newspaper that championed faith and family would have disappeared. Seeing the financial spreadsheets, people wondered, how long until they closed down? Nonetheless, the more they doubted us, the greater was my husband's and my faith, and the greater was the commitment of the Washington Times staff. Together with them, we resolutely defended democracy while advocating family values, morality and the role of women. As a result, the newspaper's popularity grew. Every year, the paper did better, and now in the age of the internet, it is one of the most influential newspapers in the United States. At a banquet to commemorate the 15th anniversary of the newspaper's founding, we received congratulatory messages from well-known leaders worldwide. Former President Reagan let people know that the Washington Times played a key role in defeating communism when he said of the newspaper, "Like me, you arrived in Washington at the beginning of the most momentous decade of the century. Together, we rolled up our sleeves and got to work. And, oh, yes, we won the Cold War." Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher of the United Kingdom also expressed her gratitude. She sent greetings, saying, "In difficult times, even more than in easy ones, the voice of conservatism must make itself heard in the media. It isn't always easy, but of this, we can be sure, while the Washington Times is alive and well, conservative views will never be drowned out. The Washington Times is influential, yet it is not a newspaper appealing only to the elite. It represents all people and inspires citizens to live decent and healthy everyday lives. The Washington Times has established itself as a voice of truth for people all over the world." Mother of Peace. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. Chapter 5, Part 5. Justice After Tears. In the 1990s, when the Chinese government initiated its Northeast Asia project to clarify historical facts and protect that area's stability, the Segi Ilbo newspaper sent a correspondent to the cities of Dalian and Dandong to do research. The correspondent was eager to visit the site of the Lushun courthouse in Dalian, formerly a Japanese colonial court in that city, which the Japanese called Raijan. Yet the courthouse, where a number of Korean patriots had been unjustly tried, was nowhere to be found. The Chinese government had long since sold the building. My husband and I heard this report with heavy hearts. It pained Koreans to hear how the historical footprints of our heroes and heroines of the independence movement, who had risked their lives for Korea's freedom, were gradually disappearing. We decided to buy the building. To us, the Lushun courthouse is priceless. It represents the suffering of the Korean people in modern history and the legacy of their patriotic spirit. Our viewpoint, shared by many Koreans, was that such a historic site should not have fallen into indifferent hands. In the end, after negotiating with the owner, the Segi Ilbo Corporation bought the building and restored the Lushun courthouse as a museum. They invited experts to visit the site and, after conducting thorough research of old documents, they recreated the original courtroom. The Lushun courthouse site is now a must-see historic landmark for freedom for young people from China and Korea and others who visit Dalian. As this was a project benefiting all of Korea, we invited Korean citizens to contribute money. In 1993, through the Segi Ilbo Corporation, we founded the Yosan Patriotic Martyrs Memorial Foundation Corporation. Besides gathering historical stories about the bravery, determination, and sacrifice of those who fought for Korea's independence, the foundation also works for peace in Northeast Asia. Historically, relations between neighboring countries in Northeast Asia have been complicated. Creating peace is like unraveling a ball of tangled yarn. It is difficult to find where to begin. But nothing will be accomplished by sitting with arms crossed. When the Segi Times Corporation reconstructed the Lushun courthouse, it did so to capture the anguish of the past age and enable visitors to experience the history of the Korean people overcoming a national crisis. It also points to the importance of creating peace within and among nations. As well as launching newspapers in Japan and the United States, our movement launched Tiempos del Mundo in Latin America and the Middle East Times in Istanbul. But it was only in 1989 that the Korean government instituted the freedom of the press that allowed us to launch the Segi Ilbo newspaper in Seoul. Since a religious movement founded the newspaper, we naturally faced opposition. As in the United States and Japan, mockery circulated. Just watch it become a mouthpiece promoting the Unification Church, people said, it'll be nothing but a religious tract. The haughtiest voices predicted, it'll stop printing before the year is out. But our determination to produce a professional news source that could serve Korea by providing fair and unbiased news and opinion was unwavering. On February 1, 1989, the presses started up and 1.2 million copies of the first edition of Segi Ilbo came rolling out. We held fast to the creed that the news media must be the voice of conscience and of the truth. This conviction has remained steadfast for more than 30 years. Our efforts garnered more than just verbal criticism. After Segi Ilbo exposed the Korean ruling party's corruption, innocent and unrelated enterprises we had founded were suddenly subjected to overbearing tax investigations that drove some into bankruptcy. The government targeted companies such as Tongil Industries, which produced essential machine parts, and Dongyang Agricultural Machinery, which was a manufacturer of specialized farming equipment, and forced them to shut down. Various powerful interests demanded that we fire the newspaper's chief editor. We did not surrender to threats or enticements. Instead, we raised the banner of social justice and virtue. Over time, with steadfast publishing of valuable news and opinion, Segi Ilbo has prevailed. When my husband and I conceived of Segi Ilbo, we knew it was being born into the world at a turbulent time. Though it has stood alone as a pine tree in an empty field, Segi Ilbo has consistently defended justice while exposing fraud, corruption, and other social ills. The newspaper caters to no political ideology or religious group. Its editors and reporters are exemplary professionals investing their blood, sweat, and tears for the citizens of Korea and of the world.